I knew this would be small for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't think that there are all that many new folks who show up every year because of where this is placed in the school year. And number two, the debate topic lecture, which everybody is excited about, is happening, and the paperless debate lecture is happening. So I'm going to treat you like there are 40 of you in here, just because, except that we can be a little more intimate and have a real conversation. I'm just going to do what I plan to do. I am Russ Tidwell. I am the debate and forensics coach at Garden City High School. I'm starting my 21st year there, and I have with me, because I asked her earlier in the week if she would kind of tag team this.
Vanna White.
My version of Vanna, Mrs. Pam McComas from Topeka High School, retired.
Retired.
As of this year, and she was there for 400 years. How long?
35 of my
So,
40 years of teaching.
So, what my goal when I suggested that somebody do this, which I've discovered at KSCA, that suggesting that somebody do something almost always means, oh good, you can do that, was to give people who are new to this the opportunity to ask some questions, to tell you some things that I learned when I started, just to kind of, and give you the opportunity to have access to some resources. Let me get some idea of what everybody's situation is so that I have some idea where you're going. So let me have you introduce yourself, tell us what you're teaching, where you're teaching, and whether this is a job change or this is a new job or what your experience like.
My name is Zachary Brown. I am the new debate and forensics coach at Hutchinson High School. This is my first year teaching in a high school setting. I have 6 or 7 years of experience teaching at a university level. I've been an assistant debate and forensics coach at Wichita East High School for about as many years, as well as assistant in the college debate programs as well.
Okay.
My name is Ariel Sarkheim. I'm kind of the odd man out because I'm still student teaching. I came with Jamel Brown from Sumner, and so I intend to teach theater, debate, and forensics.
Okay.
I graduated from Topeka West, so I remember you.
That's where I teach. Ding-a-ling. Oh, Melanie Ralston.
I know.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great.
It's old cowboy.
It is. Oh my goodness.
And so you're currently student teaching?
Yes,
All right.
I did the whole gonna be famous and
What,
all that
all
stuff,
right,
and then I
all right.
realized
Well, excellent.
I could
What
teach
college?
instead. I went to UCM in Warrensburg, and now I'm getting my grad at Avila.
Okay.
Well, my name's Scott Huggins. I teach at the Independent School in Wichita, Kansas. This is actually my 4th year teaching this, but I still feel like, I'm essentially, for a variety of reasons that are too complicated to go into now, the forensics program sort of crashed, and I was sort of called in to oversee it was sort of, hey, the plane's here, do you want to be a pilot?
Reboot.
So, it crashed, and I rebuilt the plane, and now we have taken off again, and we are ascending. But that's what's going on. I teach forensics, only forensics, as far as speech goes.
Okay.
But I'm always on the lookout for new ideas and
All right.
suggestions.
I'm Melanie
You're here,
Ralston.
you're here.
I'm really the odd man out. I've coached at Topeka West for 30 years. I don't want to listen to the debate lecture, so and I'm currently teaching there as well. So I'm going to see if these people lie to you.
Okay.
Well, and we will, without a doubt.
They won't.
Let me give you a little bit of a story to start, because I think this might help you feel better, either because you're in the situation I was in or because you're going to come from a much more prepared place than I came. My experience is that as a junior in high school, I walked into a class that was labeled speech, thinking that they would help me get better at writing speeches for VOAG. And when it turned out not to be a traditional speech class and actually turned out to be competitive forensics, I tried to leave. They wouldn't let me leave until the end of the semester. I had to go to at least one tournament that semester, and like so many kids, you go to that first tournament and you're just hooked. And so I didn't do any of this in college. I did it for 2 years in high school. The sum total of my competitive debate experience was about 4 tournaments in Lincoln Douglas debate in 1986, when nobody knew what Lincoln Douglas debate was. And so when I finished college and was looking for a job, the debate job at Garden City High School was open, and a friend of a friend, you know how those things lay themselves out, knew that the job was open, and I was hired to coach debate with exactly no competitive debate experience other than sitting in the back of a room with Ballard for about 5 or 6 years. I understood debate. I'd watched a lot of debate. I'd watched a lot of debate in a circuit that was pretty contemporary for the time. I spent a lot of time watching fast debates, but to walk into a classroom and be able to teach it was overwhelming, just absolutely overwhelming. Because I had never been taught it. I'd never been taught debate. And so I say that for a couple of reasons. One, I know that at least Zach has a lot more debate experience walking into his debate classroom than I had. You may feel the way I felt about forensics, for example. I don't know what your debate experience is. Clearly your acting experience is, you're going to be comfortable in that realm, right? You've been teaching it for a couple of years, and you figure out about the 4th or 5th year that you really still don't know exactly what you're doing, and you still need some help.
More or less.
And so I tell you that story to let you know that no matter what your experience walking into the classroom, I don't think the most important thing for a competitive coach in debate or speech is to have come from the outside. I think the most important thing, and this is maybe the only thing I say that matters today, I think the most important thing is that you know how to be a cheerleader for the kids who need a cheerleader, a goalie for the kids who need a goalie to kick them back into play, and that you are energetic and willing to take those kids and go do it. If you do that and you're willing to learn as you go, I think anybody who likes these activities can learn to coach them at some level, and probably they're pretty successful. Does that make sense at all? Pam came to this activity as a coach with a lot of debate experience. I don't know about
High school and
forensics, but certainly a lot of debate experience.
Yeah.
And she and I both have been beaten by people in their first, second, or third year with no experience coming into the activity, and by people who have a lot of experience. And so I would try just to help you relax a little bit. There are going to be moments for panic that come. Usually about 11 o'clock the night before something has to happen, and you're not sure how to do it. But I learned pretty fast that if I was willing to learn along with the kids, sometimes keeping up with them, sometimes trying to stay ahead of them, I was in okay shape. I've also become pretty comfortable before I get into the actual presentation with the idea that when it gets to that 3rd and 4th year of especially debate for me, and even forensics sometimes, I should have kids who are better at this than me. They still need my guidance. They still need my wisdom. But coaching isn't doing it. I don't have to be as good an actor as the best actor on my squad. I don't even have to be as good a speaker as the best speaker, and I certainly don't have to be as good a debater as the best debater on my squad. I just have to come to them with boundaries and wisdom and understanding of the activity so that I can push them and pull them in the right directions. Okay? So, with that being said, I'm going to start with a list of things that I didn't know that I wish I had known I needed to know. You like that sentence? And Pam helped me add to this. Mela, you can certainly throw some in as we go. These are things that I think that you need to know as you start your first year or you start heading into your teaching experience that nobody's going to tell you in college. Okay? First of all, you're going to show up and have to create a tournament schedule. And that's going to be foreign to every other coach in your building because the AD creates all the sports schedules. They don't create yours, and you don't want them to. You don't want them to. And so you need to know how to create a tournament schedule. Now that depends a little on the circuit that you live on. It depends a little bit about where you live geographically. If you live in the Kansas City, Topeka area, there are a lot of really close local tournaments, and creating that schedule is going to be much more simple, or even the Wichita area, or through the central part of the state where you're at. From Garden City, creating a tournament schedule was a challenge, and still is a challenge. And so, a couple of things that will make this easier for you than they were for me when I started are that, at least in terms of debate, there is, if you want your kids debating at what a lot of us consider to be the top end of the activity, there is a schedule of tournaments every weekend that have a varsity division where the best kids are supposed to be competing. And that's the DCI qualifying tournaments. I start my schedule with the DCI qualifying tournaments because that's easy. And then I go in and I plug in local tournaments for the kids who aren't going to debate to that level or don't want to debate to that level. Because I really believe that debate and forensics both are good for every kid. Whether it's the kid who's going to be a DCI top speaker, or whether it's a kid who's going to debate the two tournaments and make them go to as a freshman and never do it again. I still think it's good for them, right? But you don't need that kid to be in a varsity division or even in a tournament that has that division. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I think has become incredibly helpful over the last 3 years, and it's better every year, is the KSHA tournament calendar. And so if you haven't already figured out how to get to that, I think that's pretty important. Finally, Josh Anderson for the last couple of years has kind of done a voluntary tournament calendar where he does a Google Doc and sends out an email when people put their tournaments in, and he'll share that document with you. And if you've got a way for me to get your files at the end of the day, there's a copy of the current version of that in that stuff, or will be, okay? So that's tournament schedules. And I'll tell you that my tournament schedules still change depending on the kids that I've got in a given week.
Well, the other thing, what will affect a tournament schedule might be when a tournament normally hosts, a school normally hosts, and for whatever reason, there is a change in coach, or we're hosting sub-state whatever in our building, or we're doing testing that weekend and we don't have access, that may affect what had normally been a tournament on a specific date. So our tournament schedules are normally somewhat in flux.
I'm glad you said that. I will add this to it too. The ADs, AD secretaries, and transportation directors do not understand what we do. They don't understand what we do. And you will, I promise you, make a transportation director crazy at some point during your first year. Because you'll sit down and do what you're told to do, and you'll make the entire tournament list, because if you don't, the van's not available.
Yeah.
The bus isn't available. And then on Wednesday, before the tournament, or on Monday, when you get ready to make your travel list, or 2 weeks out, whatever your organizational system is, you'll look at this, and you don't have enough kids to send that van. Or you have more kids than will fit in that van. Or the tournament disappeared. And I wish that didn't happen, but it does happen. Everybody who's taught for very long has experienced this, am I correct? And I've got a brand new transportation director this year, and every time we get a new transportation director, I just know that I'm going to spend a little bit of time in the transportation office explaining how this stuff works.
Yeah, the other piece is talking about the AD or the transportation director. They also need to become your best
You
friend.
need to be very friendly.
Because
Treat them
your AD is not, and nor do you want them to, does not typically send in your participation cards or your state entry. The first thing you want to do is go to your AD and say, I want all of my KSHS AA cards for the year.
Can I make an addendum to that? Just go to your AD and you just have to ask them confidently, I need the password to get into the
That's
system, and then you go get your own.
Right.
Don't allow
Actually,
them to.
the printed cards are done this year.
Yeah, it's all
It's
online.
all, so that's the next thing on my
Okay, we'll
list.
see.
That's the next thing on my list. I wish somebody had explained to me state association deadlines my first year, and forms. Because there used to be a date by which if you didn't turn in the cards, your school wasn't participating. And there's a fee for that, and an extra fee if you don't pay it on time. And that all comes out of your AD's office. And then there's a date by which you have to say, yes, Keisha, we're coming to the two-speaker tournament, or yes, Keisha, we're coming to the regional tournament. And if you miss those deadlines, there's a very limited window of, oops, we'll still let you in, but it costs you a bunch of money. And then you just can't get in. When I taught debate for 10 years before I became the head forensics coach. The first year that I was the head forensics coach, when I had to turn in all the stuff for state forensics, I thought my head was going to explode. We had to fill out paperwork. We had to fill out a card for every kid with all the information. You could only print 3 cards at a time. You had to reprint the card. I mean, and if it wasn't in by 4 o'clock on this date, your kids couldn't go. And then after that, if a kid got sick, I mean, there's are things about, so familiarize yourself with the Keisha deadlines and the Keisha forms. I think that stuff's easier now than it used to be because it is all electronic. It's time consuming. If you have a full entry for state forensics, you should plan to spend about an hour filling all that stuff out. If you do state forensics and state festival, you should plan to spend, last year it took me 3 hours to do all our stuff. Just typing it and hoping it uploaded to the Keisha upload gods and whatever. So, there's some people, and I should have put transportation director in this list, there's some people that you need to be very, very friendly with. You need to treat them well. Your AD, and almost no AD understands this stuff. I promise you understand these activities better than your AD does. The only time that's not true is if you are an English teacher who never planned to teach this and you got drafted. And that happens, and that's another level of you're going to have to get some extra help. But your AD, and increasingly of importance, I think maybe more important, your AD secretary. I still randomly just take my AD secretary chocolate. I don't do it as often as I used to, but I still do it. I do it for the transportation director too, or actually the person who holds the van book. Take care of those people. I'm not saying kiss up, although I'm saying kiss up. A little bit. Just be friendly.
It's sort of like your head custodian.
I tell you, those folks, when you think about what transportation people do and what your AD do, think about the amount of things that your AD has to deal with in a day. Every sport, every coach, every assistant, every official, if you just think about the amount of things that an AD has to deal with a day, if you can take some of that off their plate by being efficient and being helpful, when you get into a scrape, they'll be on your side. And I think that's incredibly important.
How many of you have assistants? How many of them are Rule 10? You need to get that Rule 10 form, and every district works a little differently, but you've got to have it downloaded from the Activities Association. Our district, USD 501, you also have to get the Rule 10 packet from Central Administration, because your Rule 10 person is going to have a TB test, and a whole, fill out the W-2 forms and a whole bunch of other things. I'm not going to use alcohol and I'm not a pervert form. All of those things. It depends on your district, but our district has those forms because you now have to have the TB test on file. So make certain you know what the policy is in your school district about Rule 10 coaches. Because you do have to fill out that Rule 10 form for the Activities Association.
I wish somebody had talked to me about signing up for, organizing, and managing trips. I watched my high school coach do that. I signed up for stuff. I was lucky in that I got to student teach with my high school coach, and so his attitude toward my student teaching was, you take the sign-up sheets and make the rest of it work. And so I did get some training in But I think as an assistant coach, sometimes you just think, hey, things are magical. I show up and there's a van and I take kids. Or maybe I go pick up a van and I take kids. Well, there's a whole back process to that you don't think about until you have to manage it. You got to know what kids are available for the weekend, what events they want to be in if it's a forensics tournament. You need to make sure that they and their parents, like, you got to have some kind of communication system with them. I've used a trip sheet form forever. I am going to continue to use the trip sheet form. This year, I'm going to migrate that to not just something I hand the kids in print. I started last year, played with a little bit using our school gradebook system because it's got an email all application in it, and started taking the text of those things and sticking them in and emailing them to everybody. I did that until I had parents complaining about me sending everybody trip sheets that their kids weren't on because I could do all or I could do none. But I think increasingly our communication with parents about these trips is becoming important. It's always been important, but I think that we need to think about the different ways that I'm forever having a junior whose parents come to parent-teacher conferences. They've been in the program now for 2.5 years. And mom or dad says, they love this, they love you, we love what you're doing with them. I wish we had some idea when they were leaving and when they're getting home. And I take a trip sheet with me to every parent-teacher conference so I can hold it up and say, have you ever seen one of these? No, that's magic, that's incredible, I've never. Well, your kid picked up 4 of them this week. They picked up one and left it on the table, and one went in a bit, and so I think managing that is important. And I put some of the, I put everything I thought a first-year teacher would need on this, in this folder for you. There's a debate sign-up sheet. I'm throwing my stuff. There's a debate sign-up sheet. There's a forensic sign-up sheet. There's a trip. I think I put a trip form in for one or both. And I'm happy to share anything with you. So if there's not something in there, or you can't figure out what something means, email me or call me, and I'll be happy to help. I wish that somebody had explained to me that I was going to be responsible for a lot of money. Because there's a reason that after 24 years, my wife still handles the money at our house. And so I know that depending on the size of school, budgeting acts differently. My wife taught in a really small 1A school for a while, and she was the band director, and she would ask about budget, and they would laugh and say, you let us know what you need, and we'll tell you if we can get it or not. I get a certain amount of budget, and I have to stay within that budget for debate and for forensics. You need to know what the status of that stuff is when you go in. It should be a question, in your situation where you're going to be looking for, it should be a question you ask in interviews. You ought to find out what the budget is like, how that stuff works. You need to know that.
The second piece of that budget, and Melanie can definitely chime in here, you need to know, is transportation being taken out of my budget, or is it not being taken out of my budget? We've got a different situation in 501. We use vans until we get into that forensic season, and then oftentimes Topeka High and Topeka West would share a bus. Vans are not costing us any money other than gasoline, and we have district credit cards for gas. Buses become a different issue for us, and that bus, you're going to have to pay out of your
And you need to know what the situation is in your district. I don't have to pay for any transportation.
See, he's a separate.
But I have very strict rules about how many kids it takes to get a bus.
Right.
And you have to know those things.
And what makes you really angry is when you had anticipated taking 20 kids on a bus to a tournament, and
You start
so
yelling
you
at
got
kids
the
who
bus, and then so the vans now are no longer available, and only 6 kids end up going, and you're like, oh my gosh, because I'm just now paying $200 for a bus when I could have had a van for free, but you wouldn't let me know, and that kind of thing. The other,
Part of managing that is making sure your kids know from the outset that when they sign up, you're going to treat that like a contract. It is going to, it affects their grade. If they bail on me when they go to the tournament that's required, it affects their grade.
the other thing is what I didn't know, particularly when I first started out teaching, and I learned very quickly. I applied for a low-interest credit card that was strictly school purchases. Because, and this is even different in the same district, different schools. When I paid for gas, I had to pay for the gas for the van because it had to be returned full. But we didn't have credit cards because too many people were losing them or whatever, and so we had to pay for our gas and then we'd get reimbursed. And I know that, a lot of you don't have a lot, you've got to have a dedicated credit card for emergency school stuff, and then just use it for emergency school stuff. And that's just what you do.
And you
need to-
pay it off when you get
When you get
reimbursed.
reimbursed. I'm gonna move us because there's a lot here. The last part of that budgeting thing is you need to know what the process in your district is for getting people paid. Our district has used a purchase order system for years. Well, we moved to a computer system this year that we're all waiting to be trained on, I used to be able to go in and write a PO and walk out of there with a purchase order and go buy things. Businesses are increasingly less likely to take POs than they used to be. Is there a district credit card? You have access to that. Are they gonna give you a credit card with you just need to know what the process is for paying for things. This is important, and it again, depends on where you live. Two of these things are very important in my district. One of those is never gonna happen in my district. If your district doesn't require you to carry medical insurance consent cards, take the one I put in the folder and carry them anyway. I have, in the last 21 years, put 3 kids in a hospital and left them in Kansas City twice. One kid in Salina, we didn't have to leave her. I have seen other coaches have, you think, well, what do you need a medical card for? You're gonna have a tragic debate accident? Talk to Vicki Fellers, who had a kid back when we carried tubs, and those bungee cords had a kid nearly lose her eye with a bungee cord. I've had kids twist their ankles, just get sick. Diabetic kids. One of the kids I left in the hospital was a diabetic kid who just wasn't taking care of herself. And in every single situation, my life was a lot easier because I could walk into that hospital with that form. And so if your district doesn't require them, I would be really surprised by that. But I think sometimes things just get missed when they can tell you things. The other side of that is that I've added a bottom section to my form that is a consent form that the parents and the kids sign that say, we know that you've got team rules, we have a copy of them, we're gonna follow them. And then Pam suggested that I add this one because if you're in a city setting, urban setting, you may have kids driving themselves. In some districts that allow that require the kids and parents to have filled out driver's permissions forms. I've never seen one of those because I live in Garden City and we have very specific policies about kids driving the tournaments. So.
Also add a caveat to that. Kids are gonna wanna ride with other kids, and you just need to have that discussion with them. They're gonna ride with them no matter what, but the problems we've had in Topeka with this, because our kids do drive quite a bit themselves to get from one place to another, is when over lunch, and they left to go to lunch, and they took 3 kids with them that you didn't know they took with them, and then they get in a wreck. It's just an issue.
If you have assistants, you need to provide them with copies too. And remember that this is all personal information. I mean,
So it's HIPAA.
right? You gotta be aware of that. All right. You're gonna have to run after school practices unless you just decide you're gonna get it all done in class. Good luck
Good
with
luck.
that. Some people have programs that are all after school. And so I wish somebody had, because my coach didn't do after school practices. He ran an incredibly successful program, still does. If they don't get it done in class, they don't do it. He has 20 kids a year to work with. I have 60 to 80. I can't get it done in class. You can't get that done in class 1 kid at a time, or 2 kids at a time, or 4 kids at a time, right? And so I think it took me 10 years to figure out how to run practices efficiently and make sure that anybody was getting anything done.
You sum that up in just a few words.
Yeah.
10 years of knowledge.
You have to be a jerk.
Okay. Well, there's some,
That was a really flippant answer, and I don't mean it for that to be.
to paraphrase Leo Tolstoy, there's only one, polite teachers are all alike, but all jerks are different. So,
Here's what I have.
how do you be
I have learned that in debate, an unwatched practice round is worse than no practice round. Which means that, and I can only, if I or my assistants are the only one there that day, that means 4 kids can practice, right? Well, that's not workable because I require every team to practice twice before a tournament outside of class. That just happens to be my practice requirement. So that means that I've got to get older kids to watch novices. And so I require the older kids to watch novices. It's a part of their class assignment.
I do a lot of
the same thing in
videotaping.
forensics. I've started using a lot of video. I've learned the value of mini debates, which are like one position debates, and you use a much shorter amount of time. Forensics practice is a different